He lay there lazily on the wooden litter, letting the horse drag him forward through the desert even with all the bumping over loose rocks along the way, and even getting soaked crossing a river. He still didn't move an inch, completely relaxed, until the horse dragged him up to the door of a rundown saloon. He slowly got up, put his boots on, ready to eat his fill inside. He walked into the saloon and brushed the dust off himself. Everyone's eyes instantly fixed on him. 2 of them were bounty hunters, and a wounded prisoner sat on the right. He didn't care at all, and walked straight to a table. Seeing him covered in grime, the owner assumed he was a beggar and spoke impatiently. "If you can pay, I can get you something to eat." He said nothing, just nodded to show he had money, then brushed the dust off his hands, ready to eat. A moment later the owner brought over a big pot of tomato sauce beans, but only scooped a small spoonful onto his plate. "That's not enough, I want more." He simply pulled the whole pot in front of him and dumped everything from his plate back into the pot, then tore off half a loaf of coarse bread, and dug straight in, shoveling bean after bean into his mouth at an astonishing speed. Even with his cheeks already stuffed full, he kept cramming more in. Tomato sauce beans is a Mexican dish with a sour and spicy flavor. For someone who hadn't eaten in 3 days, this dish was exactly what he needed, of course. Watching him wolf it down like this left everyone around him stunned once again. Once he was about 30% full, he poured himself a full glass of rum to wash it down. After letting out a very satisfied burp, the bounty hunters at the next table finally couldn't hold back, curious about who this man really was, because no one could walk out of the desert in such a short time, let alone look this rough while doing it. They couldn't help but suspect that he was a wanted fugitive on the run. The bounty hunter used a piece of bread to lift his chin, trying to get a good look at his face while also getting his partner to confirm whether he matched the man on a wanted poster. After checking, there was no bounty listed for this man at all, but instead of apologizing for such a reckless act, the bounty hunter mocked him, calling him nothing but a crude glutton. Anyone else would have been furious by now, but all this man cared about was eating. He just smiled and ignored them for the last few bites. Only a thick layer of glossy red sauce remained in the pot. He used a slice of bread to wipe the bottom and sides of the pot completely clean. Once he was full and satisfied, a fierce glint flashed in his eyes. He calmly strapped his gun holster to his waist, then walked toward the 2 men without a hint of fear, gesturing straight to the wounded prisoner to come with him. The bounty hunters were stunned on the spot. Just who did he think he was talking so boldly? "What's your name?" "They call me 3 head 6 arms." 3 head 6 arms, huh? So you're the devil's right hand. It turned out this man was a famous sharpshooter known far and wide. After hearing that name, no one dared to say another word. "How much do I owe you?" "It's free. It's on me." Thanks. But the food wasn't that great. He calmly strolled out of the saloon, but the 2 arrogant bounty hunters weren't ready to let it go, and tried to ambush him with their guns as he stepped outside. Without even turning around, he shot both of them dead behind his back. Learning that the wounded prisoner had been framed and was being falsely hunted, he didn't take advantage of the situation to give the man a hard time. Instead, he let the man lie on the litter behind the horse while he himself sat in the saddle and rode on toward the town. Just as he stepped over the edge of town, he immediately sensed something dangerous lurking about the place and turned right into a small alley, staying hidden at a distance to see exactly what was going on. He's committed rape. He deserves a proper trial. A gang of thugs was surrounding the town's sheriff, trying to force him to hand over the man riding behind Cornette, though the sheriff stood alone, facing the pressure of the whole crowd. He never once flinched at these hoodlums. Cornette stood off to the side watching the show and quickly pieced together the whole situation. It seemed it was these very thugs who'd framed the man. Things were about to get out of hand. Cornette, still on horseback, slowly rode straight through the middle of the crowd. This move left the sheriff utterly baffled, and left every one of the thugs frozen in place too. But he didn't ride off. He simply stopped not far away. 3 of the thugs happily made him take off his gun belt, so they could enjoy the coming show in peace. He obediently complied, back down on the litter, casually settling as a spectator. Before the duel even began, Cornette had already predicted the outcome. They'd be dead before they even drew their guns. Sure enough, just as he'd said, the man was puzzled how he could predict it so accurately. Cornette slowly explained that the sheriff standing there was, just like him, one of the top gunmen around, known as the Devil's Left Hand. After the sheriff easily took down all the thugs, were unwilling to accept defeat. There was nothing they could do against him, so they had no choice but to leave with their men. Afterward, Cornette brought the wrongly accused man to the police station and told the sheriff exactly what had happened. The sheriff immediately issued a certificate declaring him not guilty. The man's injuries were quite serious, so everyone decided to treat his gunshot wound. First, Cornette handed him some strong liquor to drink down to help numb the pain with the alcohol. Then the two of them used the crudest method possible to dig the bullet out of his body. "How's mother doing?" "Same as always." "Where is he?" "He's opened a little bar in New Orleans." "I'm talking about the bullet." "Oh." The man, half out of his mind with pain, didn't feel any pain the whole time. The bullet was pulled out quickly. With shattered glass-like fragments flying everywhere, the sheriff shot him a fierce glare while pressing down on the blood vessel with his finger. After treating the wound, the sheriff temporarily put the man in a cell to recover. "I was dreaming, huh?" He told Cornette he had to send the man home the next day and warned him plainly that if he kept provoking the thugs, more trouble would come knocking later, and the police station wouldn't be able to handle it. It turned out the sheriff was actually Cornette's own older brother. A year earlier he'd broken out of prison and become a fugitive. Back then he'd accidentally killed a stranger who'd been tracking him down. Only afterward did he learn that the man he'd killed was this town's newly appointed sheriff. One moment of bad judgment had led to a huge mistake, so he simply took on the dead man's identity and stayed in town to turn his life around, protecting the peace of this place. Precisely because he'd gone down the wrong path himself, he feared his brother would repeat his mistake, so he always kept a cold face toward him. "Go on then. Sleep here tonight, and leave tomorrow. We'll talk about it later. You two really are brothers." Cornette, being carefree by nature, didn't mind his brother's coldness toward him at all and just turned around to go take a bath and rest. What he had no idea about was that to protect the town and stand against the thugs, his brother had long been carrying an enormous burden. The thugs often ran wild around town, bullying the ordinary folk, but the sheriff alone simply couldn't get rid of them by himself, so he decided to keep his brother around after all and appointed him deputy sheriff to help him. $1 a day. $2 a pound. Living expenses. Plus some corn flour. Be your cook. As soon as the new deputy sheriff took office, he couldn't resist wandering around the town. He happened to run into two innocent, pretty country girls and instantly couldn't take his eyes off them. But just at that moment, a fierce argument broke out from inside a shop. The usually carefree Cornette immediately sharpened his expression and went on alert. A moment later, an old farmer was roughly thrown out of the store. Watching this honest farmer's family being humiliated in public, Cornette's anger was completely ignited. He'd already been looking for a chance to establish his authority in town, so he decided this was his business now. He helped the old farmer back into the store and demanded the clerk sell him goods as normal, but the two cowboys inside, backed by the thugs, refused to back down even in front of the new deputy sheriff. Cornette immediately showed his hand to intimidate them. Only then did the cowboys realize, and they had no choice but to back off. Right after, the girls smiled and thanked Cornette. Cornette then turned around and gave the two cowboys a brutal lesson. They were simply no match for him at all and were beaten into a miserable state in just a few moves. But those folk outside the fight inside the store and rushed over to watch the commotion. In the end, Cornette walked out of the store without a scratch. After this incident, he completely earned the respect of the whole town. But the trouble was far from over. The thugs usually hung out at where the thugs were sitting at a table playing cards. Cornette walked up with a grin and gave them a warning. The farmer, before Mokiti finished speaking, one of the men behind him tried to ambush him. Someone upstairs also tried to set an ambush, which he'd also seen coming in advance. You can all play together. In just those 2 hours, the town store was wrecked. 3 men had their heads cracked open. 1 was badly injured and 1 got knocked out. With such a huge commotion caused, the sheriff was nearly furious to death. He blamed everything entirely on his brother. Once the conflict fully escalated, since the thug's true identity was an army colonel. He could very well call in cavalry troops to settle things. If a large-scale conflict broke out, his own secret identity as sheriff/fugitive would no longer stay hidden, and then things would truly be beyond saving for the town's stability. He decided to harden his heart and drive his brother away. But his brother insisted on staying since he'd already come this far. Fine then. You troublemaker. You keep stirring up trouble, right away. Deputy, go to the office. But the peace didn't last long. Cornette caused trouble at the bar yet again. Officer Oldby rushed hurriedly to the sheriff's quarters to report. Sheriff, open the door quickly. You lump of 200+ pounds. Hurried, exactly happened. Your brother, he's at the little bar. Is he dead or not? What? Least when I left your brother was still alive. He felt utterly exasperated. Why does he always cause trouble for himself? Bambino grabbed his weapon, rushed straight to the bar only to find several cowboys surrounding Cornette, ready for a beatdown. After asking what happened, he learned that old hag, this group had publicly insulted their mother, originally wanting to keep things low-key. Bambino, unwilling to let it slide any further since both sides were government officials. The cowboys also feared causing a death and being hunted nationwide. Both sides agreed to set aside their weapons and settle it with their fists instead. A 2-against-9 showdown officially began. The cowboys thought the two brothers were being way too arrogant. But once the fight started, the situation completely flipped. Everyone ganged up to attack the sheriff alone. But he was already immensely strong, and in the face of such overwhelming strength, every attack against him was useless. Cornette, standing off to the side, didn't step in, watched the fight. Before long, every single cowboy in the place had been knocked flat. Afterward, the two brothers had a drink together and talked about their mother back home. The next morning, the sheriff took his brother to the Valley Ranch, a place with grass and trees. Stunningly beautiful herds of cattle and horses grazing on the grassland like a paradise in the middle of the western wilderness. This vibrant green valley stood out all the more, and precisely because of that, nestled by the mountains and rivers, had become a target coveted by every faction around. The villagers at first assumed the two were just passing through, but on closer look they realized who had helped them outside the store that day. So the village head warmly invited the two of them to lunch. Cornette agreed without a second thought, and seeing this, his brother could only go along with it. The villagers were devout and had to perform a ritual before every meal, requiring everyone to set aside any weapons before eating. Brother, what's with your gun? Please don't bring weapons to God's table. Don't put it too far away. Thanks, brother. Let us pray. Before he could even settle in, he had to get back up. Because there was yet another prayer to say. The brother, always carefree and rough around the edges, unable to understand why a simple meal needed so much ceremony. But just as everyone was eating, a gang of Mexican bandits came charging in aggressively. Women and children quickly hid inside the tents. The two brothers hurriedly hid their badges as well. The bandit leader pretended to be friendly, chatting with the village head. Luckily, the man followed local etiquette and voluntarily took off his own sidearm, which gave the brothers a small sense of relief. But they never expected that the village head, serving water instead of alcohol, would completely enrage. Instantly turned hostile and yelled at the village head and ordered all the villagers to line up to be punished. Under the pressure of his brutality, the villagers had no choice but to obediently comply. Ha! You won't drink. You won't drink. Just as Teddy's turn came to Cornette, the village head hurried forward to plead on his behalf. But this kindness not only failed, it only made things worse in front of these bandits. The two brothers had always despised evil to the bone. Right as Teddy raised his hand to teach Cornette a lesson, he turned to see one of his own men had grabbed his hat, and he immediately slapped his own man for it. By the time he looked back at the man in front of him, Cornette had already swapped places with his brother. Seeing this stocky, solidly built man, Teddy suddenly got interested. You look unfamiliar to me. But you're quite strong and tall. Put your hand down. After a hard shove and a slap, the man didn't budge an inch. The laughter that had filled the scene instantly went dead silent. Before Teddy could even register what had happened, he was knocked flat by one punch from the sheriff. His men hurried to help their boss up, but their boss, furious, still wanted to humiliate himself further. After taking 2 slaps, the bandit leader realized he'd run into someone tough. The whole gang fled the valley in disgrace. Before leaving, the bandit leader dropped a harsh threat that he'd never let the two brothers off the hook. Immediately lifted, the villagers came pouring out of their tents. Though the bandits had been driven off this time, this gang would inevitably come back again eventually. Before leaving, the sheriff urged the village head to form a self-defense militia, but the village head and his 2 daughters firmly believed that love and kindness could dissolve any evil, and absolutely refused to use weapons against bad men. The sheriff was utterly stunned to hear this. With no other choice, he left the place with his brother. Thanks, manager. Let's go. The two of them, having not eaten all day, finally got to have dinner at the police station. Who knew whether this would be their last supper? Why do you say that? At that point, Officer Oldby told them. Two strangers had arrived in town, both looking fierce and menacing, clearly not good people. Cornet immediately perked up with interest, wanting to go check it out himself, but his brother stopped him. Where are you going? I'm gonna welcome those two ugly monsters. Didn't you say you wouldn't cause trouble anymore? I just don't like people with ugly faces. Stop reaching for your trigger all the time. Don't move. In truth, his brother had already guessed that these were hired guns specifically brought in by Colonel Harrison with the sole goal of eliminating the two brothers. Meanwhile, the thuggish colonel had also long had his eye on the valley, that fertile stretch of land, determined to drive out every last villager and turn the place into an army horse ranch. But given his position, it wasn't appropriate for him to get his own hands dirty, so he hired two top assassins at a high price, instructing them to first eliminate the sheriff and the deputy sheriff, the two most troublesome figures, before finally dealing with the villagers. That noon, Cornet happened to glance out the window and spotted two men dressed in black with ugly, menacing faces. He recognized at a glance that these were the assassins. Far from feeling scared, Cornet was instead thrilled and got the urge to test himself against these top guns. Right after that, the two assassins walked straight into a shop across from the scenic area. Unable to resist, Cornet quietly slipped out without telling his brother. The two men seemed to be strolling around aimlessly, were actually luring him deeper into the store. He glanced over at the colonel watching from a distance, which only boosted his confidence even more, so he simply strode right into the store. The two assassins had already been waiting there, but after sizing them up, he felt they looked flashy on the outside. So he simply ignored them and went about browsing the goods on his own. This dismissiveness made the assassins feel their skills were being insulted, and they immediately stepped forward to provoke him outside. The colonel was full of anticipation, but instead, after a few gunshots, his two highly paid assassins came stumbling out of the store in disgrace. While Cornet once again walked out completely unharmed, cruel indigents immediately surrounded him. Being the guilty party who accused first, they blamed Cornet for firing his gun recklessly in town, threatening to report him to the governor to have him expelled from the territory. Hearing this, the sheriff felt deeply uneasy. Having taken on the identity of the previous sheriff was already something that couldn't stand the light of day. Little did he know, the real sheriff, who had luckily survived back then, was actually out there searching for him. A wanted notice had already gone up on Bambino. That guy who stole my sheriff's badge. He's not dead. Is... Huh. He wants you to help catch me. How ridiculous, huh? $200. You want to sell out your own brother, huh? You underestimate me way too much for that little money. But Bambino knew very well that a secret can only stay hidden for so long. That day, to avoid dragging his mischievous brother down with him, he raised his gun and forced Cornet to leave. And so the two brothers went their separate ways. But Cornet didn't leave right away. Instead, he turned back and went to the valley, missing the village head's stunningly beautiful daughter. He planned to see her one last time. The village head saw right through his intentions and told him the two girls were down washing clothes by the river. Cornet hurried straight to the river. The girls warmly invited him to come play with them. Cornet jumped into the water without a second thought. The three of them had a wonderful time together. The two sisters even openly said they hoped he'd stay in the village and become their husband, as the village practiced polygamy. Cornet never expected happiness to arrive so suddenly, so he decided to settle down and make his home there. Back in the village, Cornet changed into a brand new set of clothes, and just as he stood before the villagers imagining his stable future life ahead, two strange men suddenly walked into the village. Worried they might mean harm, Cornet had the village head go greet them, while he waited behind to make his move at the right moment. The two men looked as if they'd just crossed the desert and went straight for the horse trough to drink from it, then arrogantly demanded that the villagers prepare food for them. It wasn't until Cornet showed up with his gun that the two of them dropped their arrogant attitude, recognized at a glance that these two were his brother Bambino's old subordinates. You're looking for my brother? Do you know where he is? Yes, he's waiting for you. What are you two up to now? The two had specifically to join the sheriff in town, once at the police station both in, and assigned them their respective duties. Cornet then went to find his brother. I want to tell you, you can't. Brother, just hear me out. In the end, what did you want to say, huh? Cornet had come back hoping to join forces with his Turk, and only that way could the villagers in the valley finally be free of harassment, and only then could he himself settle down here in peace and start a family, leaving his old wandering life behind for good. He even swore an oath to the sky that from now on he would truly turn over a new leaf as his brother's brother. Bambino was utterly taken aback, but after thinking it over he agreed to his brother's request. "All right. I'll help you. And after that we go our separate ways. I know very well. You've completely changed now. Thank you, you won't regret it. I think. As for how to deal with the colonel, you don't need to think about it, I'll figure it out." That's exactly what I was thinking. At the same time, the colonel had also come up with a new scheme. He took the initiative to reach out to Teddy, the bandit leader, proposing they team up to drive out the villagers in the valley. With 20 horses as the reward once the job was done, the greedy Teddy agreed to cooperate right away, and just like that, the two evil forces joined hands. The sheriff told the villagers about the danger ahead, but the villagers still held firmly to their beliefs, refusing to harm anyone, willing only to defend themselves if attacked first. With no other choice, Bambino had to personally defend skills, but after only a few days of practice, the villagers only managed to learn the bare basics, nowhere near enough to stand against the evil forces during training. Cornet suddenly noticed someone secretly watching from the hilltop, mainly because of that distinctly Mexican-style hat which stood out far too much. He immediately told his brother about it, so the sheriff quietly arranged some men and successfully captured the spy alive. At first the spy refused to talk until a gun barrel was pressed hard against his nostril. Only then did he spill the entire plot between the colonel and the bandits. Learning that the enemy had gathered more than 20 men, the sheriff found himself in a difficult spot. With too few men, a head-on confrontation stood almost note them instead, and in the meantime, tonight, make the colonel suffer a bit of property loss to teach him a small lesson. In the early hours of the morning, the group dressed up in Mexican style, forcing the spy along with headed to the colonel's horse ranch. Following the plan devised beforehand, the spy lied that the villagers in the valley had already awed the colonel's guard. The group used this opportunity to quietly drive off all the horses at the ranch. By the time the guards noticed, it was already too late, and successfully made off with a large number of fine horses while the town remained in constant turmoil. The real sheriff, whose identity had been taken over years earlier, came to the police station leaning on a cane. Luckily, with just a few words, Old Bi managed to send him away. Early the next morning, Old Bi took every single gun from the police station and went to find Bambino, spilling the news that the real sheriff had come by, hoping Bambino would give him a cut of the profits. Bambino promised he wouldn't shortchange him a single cent, and then began putting together a battle plan, but his plan met with fierce opposition from the village head, who didn't want to see his home destroyed, and was convinced the colonel wouldn't harm a peaceful old man, just as the sheriff was struggling to convince him otherwise. The colonel had already brought a large force of men and bandits advancing on the valley in full force. The entire village stood there in a neat line, glaring fiercely back at them. The colonel expected the village head to kneel and beg for mercy, but instead the village head stayed perfectly calm, and flatly declared his ambitions would never succeed. The colonel said nothing more and immediately ordered his men to start tearing down the houses, but right at that moment a gun barrel pressed against the back of his head. "Whoa, whoa. What is it, Major? Come here for a second. Wait a moment. Our plan has changed slightly." The colonel hastily called his men to stop. His men were left completely confused, having no idea their boss was already being held at gunpoint. Before anyone could react, Bambino and his men, all armed, revealed themselves together. With the situation clearly lost, the colonel had no choice but to fake an apology. Bambino warned him never again to harass the farmers in this valley, respecting the villagers' belief in never taking a life. Bambino didn't use his gun but instead suggested settling things with fists. A brawl was about to break out. The self-defense the villagers had practiced finally came in handy. After a chaotic round of fighting, the villagers ultimately came out on top. The colonel had no choice but to surrender, promising not to cause any more trouble. Yet he still insisted on taking back the 20 horses that had been stolen. The two brothers played along together, deliberately playing dumb, and flatly denied ever stealing any horses, with no way to prove it, and unable to beat them anyway. The colonel had no choice but to leave. Bambino had originally planned to sell the 20 stolen horses for money and get rich overnight, but little did he know his brother had already given all the horses away to the villagers, which left him absolutely furious. In the end, Cornet chose not to stay there and followed his brother wherever he went. "Brother, why won't you let me come with you? Let's see, if you don't want me to shoot you while you're sleeping." "I'm starting to doubt that now. I'm heading east now. Back home to lie low." You head west." Now that Bambino's true identity had been exposed, nor did he want to bring his troublemaking brother along, so he set off for California with his two followers in search of a new path. Cornet found himself alone once again. This was an American Western film made in Italy in 1970. That very first pot of tomato sauce beans from the opening scene still looks mouth-wateringly delicious even now, comforting and stress-relieving. If you're also looking to set aside your exhaustion for a while and feel the purest kind of joy, this classic comedic Western, a landmark of film history, is absolutely worth watching. Just how unlucky could this gang of wanted men possibly be? They'd found a hidden spot and cooked up a pot of beans only to get spotted by a burly stranger passing through, and that he had a gun. They didn't dare take any chances and had no choice but to raise their hands in surrender. They assumed the burly man was a bounty hunter, never expecting he was actually a wanted fugitive himself. Everyone finally let out a sigh of relief and let their guard down, even inviting him to join their group to cross the desert together. But then the burly man suddenly asked them if they had any spare bullets, since he'd run out of his own. The clueless outlaws had no idea that one crook was about to rob another. The burly man searched them one by one, then happily had them bring over all their horses too. What made it even more infuriating was that he wouldn't even spare the pot of beans. Watching him eat with such gusto made the cowboys drool with hunger, but all they could do was watch helplessly. The one sent to fetch the horses felt he couldn't just let this go and tried to ambush him. His partner caught on instantly and immediately tried to distract the burly man. "Hey, The group all frowned deeply, lamenting that they should never have left the house today. After finishing off every last bean, the burly man simply tossed the pot aside and politely said goodbye while knocking out the one who still tried to fight back. And just like that, in a mere 10 minutes the outlaws had lost 4 horses, a pot of beans, a box of ammunition, and all their money. But that wasn't even their unluckiest moment yet. The real tough guy was about to slowly make his entrance. A man covered head to toe in dust, wearing ragged clothes, lying on a wooden litter, letting a horse drag him along through the desert. The iron pot tied to the litter was already rusted through. At his feet lay scattered half-eaten slices of bread, but this shabby-looking man was none other than the top gunslinger, Cornet. The horse suddenly came to a stop. He slowly sat up and looked off into the distance, smoke curling up from among a pile of rocks. Someone was probably cooking there. Meanwhile, the unlucky group of 4 had cooked up another pot of beans. But just as they were about to grab their bowls and dig in, they suddenly sensed a stranger approaching. Having learned their lesson the hard way, the 3 of them quickly hid themselves, leaving only the cowboy who'd been knocked out, still dazed, sitting there in a stupor. Cornet curiously walked over to take a look at the elaborate setup. "I'll be happy to fly." Seeing how filthy he looked, the man questioned him about who he was. Cornet lied, claiming he was a wanted fugitive worth just $50. With his honest, simple-looking appearance, he instantly put everyone at ease. The cowboys even joked that they'd try riding Cornet's horse later for themselves. That comment completely gave away their real intentions. But Cornet hadn't grown up naive, so he deliberately taught them a method for treating a concussion in their friend. And, I know. After following his instructions, the already dazed cowboy became even more dazed. Only then did they realize they'd been played and immediately decided to get rid of Cornet and take his horse while they were at it. Even surrounded on all sides, Cornet remained perfectly calm, seeing him as easy prey. 2 of the cowboys kept right on cooking their beans, sending only one man to The 4 of them once again found themselves completely at someone else's mercy. Cornet ordered them to hand over their weapons and carried off the entire pot of freshly cooked beans. After his long journey, he was already starving. As he ate, he even fed some to the horse beside him. Bored with nothing else to do, Cornet forced the cowboys to fight each other for his entertainment, with only the final winner allowed to live. The men held nothing back, beating each other black and blue. Before long, only one dazed, staggering cowboy was left standing. By the time he looked up, Cornet had already vanished without a trace, so all that was left for that day was one battered friend and a gun, nothing else. The scene then shifted as Cornet returned to his hometown after being away so long. After a brief greeting with his parents, he walked into the house. Hey. It turned out the man who'd robbed the outlaws at the very start, seeing his brother suddenly show up on his tail again. Bambino, soaking in the bathtub, looked utterly displeased. This troublemaking brother was someone he wished he could avoid entirely. Poured straight in the bathwater his brother had just used. The water in the tub instantly turned crystal clear. By comparison, dinner time soon arrived. But their mother insisted everyone say grace before eating, which gave his brother a splitting headache. Amen. After that, the whole family ate delicious roast turkey in warm, cheerful harmony. Then, as their mother went to get some wine, she unexpectedly spotted 4 uninvited guests approaching the house. But the whole family remained remarkably calm. Clearly this was nothing new to them. Their mother skillfully loaded the guns with practiced ease. 4 masked bandits burst through the door and instantly recognized the 2 brothers as the very ones who had robbed them, one after another. Ha 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 ha. Before the bandits could make a move, their mother appeared from behind with a gun in hand, too busy stuffing their faces with meat. Meanwhile, their father took the chance to search the bandits and strip them of whatever money they had left. Once the group had been completely cleaned out, they were thrown out of the house. Now the outlaws truly had nothing left at all. It wasn't hard to see that the 2 brothers' wild freewheeling talents had entirely been grown men for many years and couldn't just keep living off their parents forever. They needed to go out and make their own way in the world. So the night before they were set to leave home, their father fell gravely ill for the 22nd time and called his 2 sons to his bedside, repeatedly urging Bambino to take good care of his brother. Bambino felt utterly helpless about it, but went along with his father's dying wish anyway, so they mounted their horses and set off. No one could have imagined that the 2 brothers had barely left home for an hour before falling right back into their old ways, robbing people on the road. Bambino kept everyone outside under control while Cornet climbed into the carriage to search for valuables. Little did he expect there was a young woman hidden inside. He was Cornet, usually bold and reckless, instead became incredibly nervous. Clearly having fallen for her at first sight, the girl told him sincerely that her family were just ordinary farmers without any real money to speak of. Cornet, embarrassed, quickly apologized and even thoughtfully told her to hold on tight and sit steady. This gentle gesture made the girl warm to him. Bambino looked around and realized only the horses were worth a few $100s. But the family was counting on selling the horses to raise money to treat his young son's illness. Learning how dire their situation was, the brothers had originally planned to just leave it at that. But then Cornet noticed a wheel on the carriage was broken. Wanting to leave a good impression on the girl he liked, he asked his brother to help him fix it. This scene left the farmer's family utterly stunned, having never seen such a kind-hearted robber before. Before leaving, Cornet even insisted his brother go talk to the girl. Bambino, reluctant but resigned, still pulled out some cash. With it, their very first robbery, and they ended up paying the victims instead. No wonder Bambino always complained about this absurd excuse for a brother. Arrived at the largest town in the West, they decided that since they'd come all this way, they had to make some real money before leaving. While Bambino needed to fix his broken gun, he told his brother to go wander around town on his own and find some way to make money, while warning him not to cause any trouble. Whirls. Cornet went noticed the card players inside the gambling table was clearly the fastest way to make money, but right now he didn't even have any starting capital. His hands started itching, scratching restlessly. Right at that moment, Bino walked into the saloon and instantly saw right through his brother's plan, quickly warning him against it. There's a card shark in there named Hendley, who wins 10 times out of 10. We have no chance of beating him at all, but what Bambino didn't know was that his brother was every bit as skilled at cards. He'd simply never had the chance to show it off before. Remembering the trick up his sleeve, Bambino ultimately gave in and agreed. Cornet walked straight over and sat down at the card table. His worried brother sat down right beside him. As soon as they sat down, Bambino was already intimidated by Henley's dazzling card shuffling technique, instantly sensing they'd lose the shirts off their backs today. Even Cornet had never seen such masterful card handling before, seeing the two of them as country bumpkins from out of town. Henley showed off his skills even more flamboyantly after the first round. Sure enough, they lost, and just as Bambino began to panic, it was Cornet's turn to shuffle. A series of flashy, precise cutting moves left Bambino thrilled with delight. That's truly my own brother, haha. Henley, once so confident, instantly grew nervous. Once the shuffling was done, everyone picked up their cards in turn. Every hand at the table looked quite good. The gamblers confidently raised their bets. Bambino, looking at his own hand, decisively followed suit. At the moment, the strongest that belonged to Henley. Holding 4 sevens, he was brimming with confidence. After several rounds of raising, the pot on the table kept growing higher and higher. By the end, everyone revealed their hands. Henley's hand beat Bambino's. Just as he was about to sweep up all the chips, Cornet calmly laid out his own hand. Cornet quickly swept his winnings into his own bag, but Henley, furious about losing, accused him on the spot of cheating. Cornet played innocent, pretending not to know what he meant. Henley reached for the gun on his hip. The whole room instantly tensed up. Cornet walked over to the bar. The two of them stood there in a standoff. Meanwhile, Bambino wasn't idle either and knocked out someone at the table who'd tried something funny, leaving Henley completely confused. Cornet once again showed everyone just how fast a real gunslinger's hand could be. Realizing he was no match for him, and even tried a sneak attack on his way out, only to suffer an even bigger defeat. After winning all that money, did was buy himself a proper elegant suit. After completely transforming his usual scruffy look, he strutted around town showing it off and unexpectedly ran into the girl who'd been on his mind ever since. He deliberately stood there, striking a proud pose, quietly waiting for her to approach him first. Daisy quickly recognized him. The once ragged-looking bandit had transformed into an elegant, dashing gentleman, which made her heart flutter, and she walked over to greet him. Cornet immediately hurried over, thrilled, remembering how he'd robbed her family before. He felt truly sorry about it, so he simply lied, claiming to be a federal secret agent, and that the robbery had actually been part of an undercover mission. The naive Daisy believed every word of it. A little later, Daisy's family returned from the hospital. Cornet meant to slip away quietly, but Daisy stopped him, wanting to introduce this agent friend to her family. Cornet couldn't stop grinning from ear to ear, and Daisy's father recognized him at once as the kind man who had once helped their family. Their conversation was overheard by a cowboy nearby, but Cornet had no idea at all. What he never expected was that the lie he'd casually told would end up bringing him an unexpected windfall in the near future. By this time, his brother Bambino had also gotten a new outfit. Learning that Daisy's little brother's illness still hadn't improved, Cornet hinted for his brother to pitch in some money to help now that they had plenty of cash on hand. Bambino was no longer stingy. The two brothers then decided to go eat at the fanciest restaurant in town. But right at the entrance, a waiter blocked their way since the place was VIP only, so they simply opened their coats and showed off the weapons at their waists and walked right into the restaurant. The two brothers been to a fancy restaurant, yet the luxurious decor inside and the aristocrats chatting and laughing didn't intimidate them in the slightest. The wealthy businessman sitting in the corner was in fact the employer of the cowboy who'd been eavesdropping earlier. Upon learning the two were federal agents, he started scheming in his head. The two brothers sat down and ordered the restaurant manager describe the dishes in French, which left them completely baffled, so they just decided to boldly order one of every single dish on the menu. Seeing this, the manager went off to arrange it. While the waiter was busy clearing dishes, the two men whispered together, planning to bribe these two agents with money so as to avoid being exposed for their crimes later, but they also worried the two might just be frauds. Right then, a waiter popped the cork off a wine bottle, making a sound just like a gunshot. The two brothers instinctively drew their guns. This reaction actually made them look quite like real agents, which convinced the businessmen they were genuinely federal agents. Realizing they'd overreacted, the brothers quickly put their weapons away. Watching the manager carefully portion out the food in this amount wasn't even enough to fill a gap in their teeth. The aristocrats in the restaurant had never seen anyone eat so boldly before. Many noble ladies kept glancing over repeatedly, but Cornet couldn't care less what anyone else thought. When the wine was served, the waiter carefully opened the bottle, terrified of setting off their instincts again. To his surprise, the waiter only poured a tiny bit into their glasses, so Cornet simply grabbed the whole bottle himself. The two of them raised their glasses and downed the wine in one water, leaving the noble ladies in the room gasping in astonishment. A male guest nearby, displeased at the sight, complained to the manager about it. The manager agreed on the surface, but instead secretly added another lavish dish for the brothers. Then the waiter prepared a dish right there at the table, and the moment the pan was lit, flames shot up everywhere. Bambino, who'd never seen this kind of cooking before, mistakenly thought they were being attacked. The two of them, feeling perfectly justified, strutted out of the restaurant, and just like that, the brothers filled their stomachs without spending a single cent. Seeing businessmen became even more convinced the two were no ordinary men and decided to approach them directly to bribe them. After being properly introduced, the businessman personally came to deliver the money himself. The two brothers were utterly confused, assuming he'd come looking for trouble. In the end, Cornet came straight out and demanded a hefty sum of $4,000. Even joking that they'd need to buy off 4 eyes, so naturally the price had to double. The businessman agreed without hesitation. Of course, however, the businessman's bodyguard was unhappy and publicly showed off his marksmanship to challenge them. Cornet fired a single shot that lit the cigarette in the bodyguard's mouth, and Bambino immediately fired another to put it right back out. Watching this scene unfold, the businessman instantly felt the money had been well worth it. After squeezing every last cent out of this town, the two headed off to a brand new town where the sheriff immediately took notice of these two strangers. The moment the brothers walked into the weapons, in the lawless chaos of the West, giving up your gun was practically handing your life over to someone else. But this was the law of this particular town, and on top of that, having already caught the sheriff's attention the moment they arrived, the sheriff even came to the saloon in person, and with no other choice they had to obediently comply. Having already had an easy taste of making money to profit, the three men in front of them were all notorious outlaws. Bambino told his brother it was best not to provoke them, but Cornet insisted another table of cowboys playing cards. He walked over and greeted them first, only to be mocked in response. Ha ha ha. Falsely claiming the men had deliberately story and provoked him, edging Bambino on to step in and back him up. With his brother leading the charge, he no longer had anything to worry. A warning, which successfully caught the attention of the three outlaws behind them. The brothers knew their chance to make money had arrived. Cornet walked up first to provoke them. One of them grabbed his wrist. To strength, he took the opening to pull off a grappling move, catching his opponent completely off guard. Every cowboy in the saloon banded together to gang up on the two of them. Luckily, Bambino was incredibly skilled in a fight, taking on many at once. Before long, every one of them had been subdued. In the end, they hauled all three outlaws off to the sheriff's office. Bambino came right out and demanded a $500 bounty. The sheriff had no way to refuse and had no choice but to lock the outlaws up and pay out the $500 reward. But a signature was required to collect the money since Bambino couldn't read or write. He had to have his brother sign. After squeezing every last dollar out of the town, Bambino simply went right back to his old ways, taking up horse thieving as his trade once again. Back then, a good horse was worth around $200. The two of them lay in wait by the river for their prey. The sound of horses whinnying reached them. Cornet went to check it out, and ran into his goddess Daisy and her family had gotten stuck in the river. Fate had struck once again. He immediately called his brother over to help, and on top of that, he especially wanted to show off in front of the girl he loved, but with two stubborn mules refusing to listen to direction. It was his brother who ultimately had to step in to pull the stuck carriage out of the river. Daisy's family decided to camp there for the night. Taking the chance to be alone with her, Cornet led Daisy to a quiet spot to talk. Just as the mood turned romantic, Bambino's voice suddenly interrupted them. As they were about to part ways again, Bambino teased Daisy's little brother, only to discover the boy's illness still hadn't improved at all. He once again gave the family some money. The plan to steal horses was abandoned. The two of them decided to head to the border to rob travelers instead, mistakenly assumed they were law enforcement and told them that the local monastery's monks had been committing all kinds of evil, hoping they could seek justice on his behalf. Skilled at sniffing out opportunity amid chaos, the brothers immediately decided to try their luck at the monastery. Upon arriving at the monastery, what they saw was completely different from the rumors. Every monk there was hard at work with kind, friendly faces. Everything seemed perfectly normal. The abbot Bambino into the confession room. He launched into a long list of complaints, recounting in detail every single act of killing and burning he'd ever committed since childhood. The abbot had never encountered anyone with so many sins before. He was so shocked he quickly pulled the curtain shut. The short-tempered Bambino flew into a rage on the spot, forcibly demanding the abbot absolve him no matter what, even tearing the confession booth apart with his bare hands. Cornet hurried over to pull his brother back, then pressed the abbot about the monastery's hidden secret. The abbot explained that border bandits disguise themselves as monks to can ruin the monastery's reputation. Once they'd figured out the truth, they immediately went to the sheriff to file a report, but the sheriff took forever to show up. Instead, unexpectedly, Daisy's father showed up. Her father explains the family was camping at the monastery, that just running an errand, delivering a letter to the three bandits who had been locked up there earlier. The two brothers sensed something suspicious about this, made up an excuse to take the letter for themselves. The letter contained a detailed address, instructing the bandits to trade weapons at the monastery that night. So Bambino had his brothers sneak into the monastery to see if there was a chance to cash in that night. Cornet climbed over the monastery wall and spotted his goddess Daisy, immediately jumping down to go on a date with her first. He kept lying to Daisy, claiming he was still carrying out a secret agent mission. He soon made a discovery within the monastery. Arms smugglers on both sides of the deal were using the monastery as their trading spot. The monks originally hadn't wanted to be involved, but the buyers had threatened their lives, forcing the monks to cooperate and keep quiet about the whole thing. The buyers mistook the abbot for the seller and handed him $50,000 directly, with the buyers vastly outnumbering them. Cornet decided not to alert anyone just yet. Meanwhile, Bambino waited anxiously at the saloon for news from his brother. All the way until the early hours of the morning. The owner said the bar would close at midnight, so Bambino simply turned the clock back to 10 o'clock. Just then, two cowboys unexpectedly showed up, asking around about the whereabouts of the three bandits. Bambino sharply sensed something was off, and quietly followed them. It turned out this group intended to break the bandits out of jail. He immediately stepped in and locked up both the bandits and the cowboys trying to break them out. And it was precisely this move that completely disrupted the businessman's arms deal. After struggling through the whole night, his brother finally returned with good news. Early the next morning, the two brothers headed back to the monastery, and that rumor was $50,000 dirty money, and got straight to the point. The brothers worked together seamlessly, pretending to be federal agents planning themselves under the guise of confiscating dirty funds. Just as the two were about to leave with the cash, the businessman arrived with a large group of men. Right at the monastery's front gate, Bambino told all the monks to grab weapons and fight back. And besides, the weapons had already been shipped out the night before. The abbot came up with a clever idea. Climbing and carrying guns or weapons was forbidden inside the monastery. The businessman, relying on his sheer numbers, didn't think twice about the unarmed monks, and ordered all his men to lay down their weapons before confidently strolling into the monastery. Among his group was the unlucky wanted man who had been robbed by the two brothers multiple times before. Once everyone had entered the courtyard, the two brothers, disguised as monks, immediately shut the gate, and had another monk lock it tightly from the outside. The businessman had come here for one purpose alone: to get his $50,000 back, because the man who'd arranged the jailbreak the night before had been locked up by Bambino, so he'd never gotten the money, forcing the businessman to come in person. He assumed the abbot meant to keep it for himself. The businessman ordered his men to go back for their weapons, but the brothers stopped them at gunpoint.
You again?
Just as they'd taken control of the situation, one of the cowboys suddenly grabbed Daisy and took her hostage to protect her. The brothers had no choice but to drop their weapons. After searching Bambino and finding the $50,000, the cowboy prepared to leave, but the front gate had been jammed shut tight. No matter how hard everyone pushed, it wouldn't budge. At this critical moment, Daisy's father pulled out a hunting rifle. Cornet grabbed it and fired a warning shot to intimidate the crowd. Seeing this, the cowboys all rushed forward at once, Bonnet immediately joining the fight. The monks nearby had at first only watched from the sidelines. Seeing the two brothers take on so many alone, having endured enough suppression, they finally found their courage, and every single one the fight. In an instant, the courtyard was filled with clouds of dust. In the end, everyone together managed to subdue all the cowboys, but right at that very moment, a strange sight. The colonel leading the group thought they looked familiar. A bit like the horse thieves the authorities had been chasing for a while. Cornet panicked and quickly handed over the $50,000 he'd just gotten his hands on to the colonel. Before the colonel could say anything further, Cornet simply went ahead and handed over every last cent of the money he'd illegally obtained recently, turning it all in order to divert the colonel's attention. Through some clever maneuvering, they managed to talk their way out of it. All the effort of the past several months had once again been reset to zero. The two brothers left the town, forced once again to continue their search for fortune, but along the way they ran into Daisy and her family once again. The man spent his entire savings on a proper suit, Piku envious. So he wanted to capture his own handsome side too. But just as he was posing stiffly for the photo, he tossed the white dove in his hand into the air, never expecting a cowboy just messing around would actually shoot the dove dead. Heidi, a bounty hunter who'd dominate for being played like that. The problem was, instead of apologizing, the man kept mocking him as a country bumpkin. Having reached his limit, Heidi walked up and fired a shot, knocking the mocking cowboy out cold. Seeing this, the other cowboy just walk away, and so both sides fell into a chaotic brawl. Despite being outnumbered, Heidi's massive, powerful build made handling them a complete breeze. His partner Trinity, standing nearby, couldn't help but smile as more and more cowboys piled on his partners. Trinity hurried over to help him out, fend him off in an almost acrobatic fashion, knocking back cowboy after cowboy in a display that looked practically like art. But just as the two were busy teaching these punks a lesson, the conductor leading it only had eyes on the road ahead, knocking out any cowboy who got in his way, indirectly helping the two brothers clear the rest of their trouble. New to town, the two of them knew the place ran deep with danger and that even tougher characters might still be lurking about. So they hurried to the sheriff's office and laid the belongings of their bounty target Bill right there on the desk. If the officer tried to weasel out of paying the bounty, but upon learning Bill had been blown up, he changed his tune and told them to wait for the sheriff to return. Trinity then rushed straight over to the bank. But he wasn't there to pull any scheme, he simply wanted to exchange the gold Bill had stolen into dollars. This exact gold had been officially stolen during a bank transport shipment and was being returned, so why was it now being exchanged instead? But the truth behind all this was known only to their bank manager, Harold. Trinity immediately headed straight for the manager's office, but facing this harmless yet sharp-tongued receptionist, Heidi subdued him with a single hand and tossed him straight into the manager's office to slide across the floor. It turned out that in this gold robbery, manager Harold had conspired with the bandit Bill from this to steal a federal ship. Luckily, the two Trinity brothers had intercepted on this valuable haul of gold. Although the robber Bill had been blown up, without any evidence, the two brothers couldn't really do anything to the manager. The manager received them right away, but the conversation didn't seem to go smoothly, with loud crashing and bangings coming from inside. Trinity getting sounds coming money he wanted. The two brothers then immediately about his future life. He wanted to open a big ranch of his own and live out the rest of his life without a care in the world. But while the future looked bright, reality turned out to be far more. Before long, a mysterious stranger appeared coming toward them. At first they didn't think much of it, Heidi in high spirits, but the man never responded. Just as they started to feel foolish for being so friendly, the mysterious man suddenly jumped off his horse and pointed a gun straight at them. He then unloaded the bullets from his own pistol, leaving the two of them no choice but to lie flat on the ground at his mercy. But his target was very specific. He packed up and took away both their entire fortune and their horses. All of it. Heidi was devastated. His beautiful dream should this business. This was the first time he'd ever been robbed. Utterly humiliated, he wished he could just crawl into a hole on the surface. Inside, his mind was racing wildly, but this wasn't the time for regret. The two brothers decided they'd chase the man to the ends of the earth if that's what it took to find him, take back what was rightfully theirs. If it hadn't been for a family who offered them food and water, the two of them would have nearly died stranded in the Wild West. At the dinner table, the two of them unexpectedly learned some surprising news. Just before they'd arrived, a remarkably generous man had come through, handing out cash to everyone he met. When he ran short, he'd have people write him a receipt instead. Wasn't this exactly the fool who'd robbed them of their money? But what exactly was this man's connection to bank manager Harold? With that question in mind, the two continued their pursuit all the way to the next town, where they happened to stumble upon a black woman being harassed by cowboys. Immediately step in to teach them a lesson, but there was more than just one of them. At that moment, a circus performer, Black Brother, came down from his high tightrope and joined the two Trinity brothers in the fight. Facing cowboys who outnumbered them many times over, the three of them feel afraid in this. After a tense standoff, both sides drew their guns. Who had the upper hand without breaking a sweat. They scared off every last cowboy, causing chaos in the street. From then on, the two brothers gained a new friend from Black Brother. They learned that the man who'd robbed them actually helping the poor wherever he went and wasn't the villain they'd assumed him to be. That the man who'd robbed them only half convinced. Learning, the brothers set off there right away. Before long, they arrived at a small town in Mexico, where people seemed to be living happy, prosperous lives with bustling, lively streets, wealthier even than some western towns in America. It was all thanks to one man who had helped them. The town thanks to one man who had helped them. Trinity brothers looked at the shrine in confusion, and were left completely stunned. Turned out the figure they worshipped was none other than the thief who'd robbed them. The two brothers' heads were spinning. See you next episode. The notorious Western out behind bars ultimately couldn't escape his fate of being hanged, but on the very last day of his life, the very friend who had once betrayed him showed up in his cell. But this man, who had long since become the town's bank manager, hadn't come to say goodbye to Ebert at all, but rather through deceit wanted to squeeze out whatever value he had left, since the manager had staged the bank robbery himself. The gold had been stolen by two bounty hunters in exchange for cash, so he wanted Ebert to come out of retirement and get the money back for him. As for the jailbreak, plan to simply let himself die, not wanting to get tangled up in any more conflict. But since his old friend still wanted to use him even now, before his death, he decided to just go along with it. Late night, the manager's men arrived right on schedule. After ambushing and taking out the guard, the two of them quickly freed Ebert. But even so, Ebert's face showed no sign of joy at all. Instead, he calmly struck a pose. Cool as ever. The moment he stepped out of the prison, he was still treated roughly, still shown no respect whatsoever. Looking at the guard who died with his eyes wide open, Ebert slowly pulled the gun from the body and without any warning at all gunned down the two cowboys. Feeling pleased with himself, he even wanted to soak his feet, but the stench of the shoes hit him straight in the head. After trying on the dead men's shoes, he happily found himself a pair that fit, then headed straight for his old friend, the manager's office. The two of them seemed to be catching up warmly. For in truthful, well, the betrayal back then had cost Bert years behind bars, but there'd been two other friends involved in that robbery too. Sweat beating on his forehead and gently wiped it away for him. This gesture only made the manager panic even more inside. Better a short pain than a long one. He immediately grabbed a knife and hurled it, but Ebert skillfully dodged it. And this was only the first man on Ebert's list left to deal with. Strangely enough, there's the blink of an eye. His portrait was sitting on an altar back in his hometown with people singing and dancing in celebration, not because a notorious outlaw had finally fallen, but rather because everyone was worshipping him like a savior, which left the two bounty hunters who'd come here utterly baffled, with the fierce Heidi especially harboring deep hatred for him. Since this man had cleaned out every last cent of money they'd worked so hard to earn, Heidi drank the local corn liquor, venting his frustration, dizzy and lightheaded, and began stumbling around. When he sat down to rest, he noticed something strange. The photo on the altar was actually Ebert himself. He assumed he was just seeing things from too much drink, but after taking another sip of corn liquor, he confirmed it really was that ugly bastard. He immediately grabbed him by the cans. Ebert kept begging for mercy, hoping to get the chance to explain the two of them, then decided to settle things somewhere quiet. Unfortunately, it was Heidi who ended up being held hostage. But Ebert didn't hurt him at all. Instead, he just told him to stay level-headed. Heidi looked up and saw the orphans Ebert had taken in, and the hostility in his heart slowly faded away. Ebert then told him that the money had gone to helping the poor back home, with some of it going to orphans as well. But he assured Heidi not to worry, since just hoped the two of them wouldn't come after him anymore. Once his revenge was complete, the stolen money would naturally be returned to them. But how could Heidi possibly trust his mere word? At that moment, Ebert's expression suddenly changed. Quickly grabbing hold of the lion pinned to his chest, Heidi was startled, thinking this guy was about to do something reckless. Right after it told him the whole story of himself and his three old friends. The three of them had grown up together since childhood, close as brothers. But during one robbery, they hadn't just betrayed him, they'd also taken credit and sent him straight to prison 15 years later. Each of them was now doing better than the last, while he himself had become a wanted fugitive, so he begged Heidi once more not to interfere with him for now. He also stated plainly, without hesitation, that the man he was after tomorrow was named Parker. However, Heidi had no interest in getting involved in their feud after all. If Ebert died before repaying him, to put Heidi's mind at ease, Ebert invited him to come along with no other choice when dealing with such a scoundrel. Heidi reluctantly agreed. At dawn in a small Mexican town, A ridiculous trial was underway where even the smallest offense could be sentenced to death on the spot and carried out immediately. It was through such brutal high-pressure tactics that town boss Parker kept every young able-bodied man in town under his control. But his emperor-like good days were about to come to an end because by this point Ebert and Heidi had already snuck into the town. The tight security made Heidi want to back out. The very next moment the two of them found themselves standing at the execution site after going through the whole procedure before they even understood what crime they were accused of. They were sentenced to death. Both of them were clean. Rescue, a gang of bandits launched an attack on the small town. Heidi and Ebert managed to save their lives amid the chaos. At this point Trinity also rushed over to help free the two of them while the fighting raged fiercely outside. Ebert had no intention of joining the battle. Instead he was scheming his own little plan and slipped away to go find his enemy Parker. Heidi followed closely to protect him the whole way, willing to risk his life just to get his money back. Before long Ebert found Parker, just as he was trying to flee, and immediately took out the guards beside him. His childhood friend could hardly believe his eyes. Parker was still bullying him just like back then. But Ebert was no longer the cowardly man he used to be. Before Heidi could even catch up, he'd already killed Parker. Asking who would pay him back now that Parker was dead, to his shock, Ebert simply said he'd forgotten all about that. This remark left Heidi absolutely furious. In just half an hour the bandits had completely taken over the small town. However, they didn't bring peace and harmony to the place at all, getting every kind of atrocity imaginable, and even continued Parker's old method of interrogating prisoners, toying with other people's lives purely for their own amusement. With the plan to get their money, brothers managed to recover the money that had been stolen from them. The two bounty hunters found the outlaw to collect their debt, only to discover the outlaw had fallen into such poverty. Sensing something was off, Heidi immediately demanded he pay them back, but outlaw had already gambled away every last cent, handing it all over to the casino across the way. But his partner stopped him, since once the man was dead the money would be gone for good too. In truth, Ebert only wanted to drag the two bounty hunters into his scheme, was in fact the very enemy who had once betrayed him. Heidi had no patience left to hear more of his nonsense, and knocked him flat with a single punch. But the next moment the three of them were sitting together again. This time Ebert let them in on the casino's secret, explained there were two rigged mechanisms inside that could ensure a chosen person would win if they could make good use of this. The debt he owed brothers could be paid off in one shot. At first the two brothers, having been deceived so many times already, didn't believe him. This was currently the best and also riskiest way to recover their money. So that very night the two of them went to scope out the casino, watching one gambler win an endless stream of chips without pause. Trinity gradually started to believe what Ebert had said. An idea suddenly formed in his mind. But where would they get the starting capital needed for the casino scheme? Just as Trinity and Ebert sat there worrying while watching a boxing match, an idea for making money struck them, and this daunting task fell squarely on Heidi's shoulders. He'd earn a reward of $50. Heidi was pushed into the ring by the other two without much say in the matter. Boxing at the time had only just recently been introduced from England into the American West, both fighters just trading blow after blow to see who could take more punishment. In the end it was Heidi who endured it all and held on until the very end, defeating the big local champion. Trinity and Ebert were thrilled beyond words. The first thing the three of them did, after all they'd needed to deal with the casino's entire security team. That very night they put their plan into action. With the help of circus performer Black Brother, Trinity successfully jumped up onto the casino's roof and quietly slipped in through a skylight. It was only then that Trinity handed the gambling funds over to Ebert. Before bringing Heidi and Black Brother inside to check out the casino's layout, they first made their way to the attic. From up there, the roulette wheel below was in plain view. They then followed a metal pipe forward, and soon found where the cheating device was hidden. The casino used a magnet control which number came up on the wheel. The metal pipe connecting to the attic was actually a speaking tube. No wonder this casino kept growing bigger and bigger. It had secretly been rigged all along. Till the next night when Ebert would enter the casino. But what the three of them didn't know was that Ebert, holding the gambling funds, couldn't resist temptation and ended up spending the night with a woman of ill repute. When he woke up, the money hidden under his pillow had been stolen without any fine. Night soon fell. The casino's cheating staff began heading to their respective stations, but were taken out one by Black Brother and Heidi and turned into playthings for the two of them. Trinity waited and waited but saw no sign of Ebert anywhere and guessed the guy must have run off again. But in reality Ebert was still scrambling to find money. With no other option, he grabbed a respectable looking passerby, threatened to a game of dice, winning every single round. He quickly gathered enough funds and rushed straight over to the casino. Once at the table he immediately placed $50 on the bet. Seeing that he'd bet on number 13, Trinity immediately signaled Black Brother down under the table. Black Brother pulled the magnet toward numbers. Sure enough, the wheel stopped right on the target number. Using this trick, Ebert quickly amassed a huge sum of money. But his continued betting on number 13 over and over, so they sent someone to investigate the situation, only to find the hidden door simply wouldn't open. Owner Wade, upon hearing the news, came down to investigate the casino himself, while Ebert still kept every bet on number T. His luck started to make the other multiple times. This one bet alone stood to win $360,000. However, Ebert didn't hesitate for a second and kept his bet firmly on the same number. At the critical moment, the casino staff broke through the hidden door. Heidi barely managed to hold off the men, and that Ebert came face to face with his childhood friend Wade, who was also the very enemy who had betrayed and abandoned him, causing him to spend 15 years in prison. The two of them locked eyes. Wade, this man had come for his life. As the roulette wheel came to a final stop, every gambler in the room was thrilled by his incredible luck. Black Brother had also completed his mission and joined the fight up in the attic. Meanwhile, inside the casino, Wade didn't try to weasel out of paying out the money. But at the same time he had his men call for the sheriff. Seeing Ebert now in a vulnerable position, Trinity stepped forward right on time to help Ebert out of trouble. After that, Heidi and Black Brother up in the attic. Wade never expected they'd come this well prepared. Just as Trinity was about to finish off Wade, Ebert stopped him, wanting to settle it himself. Heidi had no interest in getting involved in that part and hurried over to cash out their winnings instead. Right after that, Ebert told everyone in the room about Wade's cheating scheme. But Wade still summed up how Ebert used to love clutching the lion pinned to his chest, trying to shake his confidence. But clearly, after 15 years behind bars, Ebert had grown far stronger inside, wanting Wade to die with at least some dignity. He decided to settle the score through a proper duel instead. The two of them squared off. In the end, Wade was the first to be hit. While Ebert, after delivering his final words, collapsed to the ground at that moment, Wade grabbed the woman beside him as a hostage but ended his life with a single shot afterward, taking the $360,000 with him. He continued on through the West alongside Ebert, whose revenge was now complete. As for Ebert faking his own death, it was simply his way of finally earning back his status as a free man. And with that, the film comes to an end.